Aloha. There we go. See, you get it. It's interesting because Joe was really going over how important it is to stay on time. And I was perfectly prepared to stay on time today, which is a challenge for an academic, right? Because we prefer to go on ad nauseum because that's an occupational hazard for what we do. So I brought my timer and everything, and then I found out I get to go longer than I was originally scheduled for. So for most people, that would be a bad thing, but for me, I'm like, well, great, I can go on for 2 hours. So thank you. Please pay attention for the next 2 hours. No. All right, so today I want to talk about artificial intelligence, go over it a little bit, but really talk about it from the standpoint of its effect in arts, media, communication, journalism, all those different areas. It's interesting because we're probably at the moment inundated with all things artificial intelligence. Obviously, there's lots of conversations, there's lots of conference presentations, there's papers, there's discussions, and it may seem a bit overhyped. But I actually don't think it's overhyped. I think it's underhyped because I think it's really something that we have to get a handle on. It's something that we have to understand, and it's going to profoundly change everything that we do. So I do research in artificial intelligence in a number of arenas, but particularly for today, I'm going to confine that to media and art creation. So, oh, did I go backwards? I'm holding it upside down, of course, see? Here I am, the technology professor, incapable, apparently, of running my own technology. But I digress, so let's go ahead and get going. All right, so what is artificial intelligence? There's a lot of ways of thinking about it. There's a lot of different types of definitions. You'll hear, if you talk to any AI expert, they all think of it and talk about it differently. There's nuances. But at its core, AI is predictive, right? So it doesn't analyze things and then repeat what it learned. But instead, what it really does is it uses existing knowledge to predict what it should do, right? So it gathers knowledge, and it uses that knowledge to predict whatever it is that you ask, and we'll get that to that in a moment. And it does that all autonomously, right? No one's directing it to what it's doing. It's learning to do that on its own. That knowledge can be generated from what we call large language models. That's just a fancy way of saying all of the different types of information that exists in many different forms, whether that's audio, whether it's images, whether it's text. There's many different data sets, all different types of information. It collects that information. It understands that information, learns from that information, and it uses that information to predict. And this is on a massive scale, obviously. So here's just a kind of a nuanced example. This is kind of oversimplified, but it gets you kind of the idea, right? So analytics is an important topic area, has been around for a while. But in analytics is different. So in analytics, you might say, okay, here's a computer model of commercial planes flying in the air at any given time so that you can better understand the complexities of air traffic control, right? So this computer model presents to you a very complex, powerful servers to do it, of a model of all of the planes flying, and then air traffic control experts analyze that and make better decisions about what to do. Okay, so that at its core is analytics. Whereas the difference for artificial intelligence is while reviewing all of the extant data that it has access to about commercial planes flying, it makes adjustments to air traffic control on the fly, autonomously, right? No one tells it the decisions to make. It gets the information, it predicts what it should be doing, and it implements that, right? It just goes ahead and does it. It doesn't have any intervention from any humans about what to do. And that's where we're going, right? In the future, humans probably won't even know what the adjustments are, right? They'll become so complex over time, we might understand them to begin with, but there'll be a point where the artificial intelligence is so complex that we might not even understand the corrections that it's making and why it's making those particular corrections, right? And it's just problem solving. That's what we're asking it to do, right? So AI isn't doing anything other than what we've asked it to do, which is to predict and problem solve. It really isn't telling you what it thinks that you want to know, and that, I think, is a common misconception about what AI is doing. It's really just predicting what the prompt that you've given it demands, and we're going to get into prompting. It requires lots of processing power. I know you probably thought there wouldn't be any math today, but here's the math, and you'll be tested on this later, so please do remember this. But current processing power for the utilization of AI is in what we call the zettaflops, so that's 10 to the 21st power, so that's a 10 with 24 zeros. Floating point operations per second. And flops themselves are complex, right? So it's a lot of processing power. And for typical requests, if we were to distill that processing power into one single computer, it would take about 21 nuclear power plants to run that one single computer. But, you know, we distribute the load across many different systems. Whatnot. So that's all just to say it requires a lot of processing power to perform and to work. So one of the things that's important to note about creative artificial intelligence, and that's kind of the fine-tuned area that I'm going to, and that's the area of creativity with artificial intelligence, it relies more on engineers and engineering than technicians. And we call this prompt engineering. And this is probably going to be a new area, already is a new area. If you look at some modern job descriptions, many companies are already looking for prompt engineering. So a prompt is just a natural language input provided to artificial intelligence for it to interpret and process, right? That's pretty much what it is. And prompt engineering is the process of generating prompts for artificial intelligence. So you give it a prompt, and a prompt engineer is just somebody that's really good at providing artificial intelligence prompt. The better input that you get, the better output that you get, right? In ancient technology times, we used to say garbage in, garbage out, meaning whatever garbage you put into the computer, you got the same garbage as output, right? The same thing is true with artificial intelligence, right? The input has to be really good for you to get the things that you want out of the artificial intelligence. So it can be as much as an art form as it is a technical proficiency, right? So you don't necessarily need to know anything about how the AI works or that it utilizes tremendous processing power. That really doesn't matter to be a really good prompt engineer. If you're good at language skills, if you're good at problem solving, if you're good at understanding, you can be a highly qualified prompt engineering without having to have the technical expertise. So understanding how it works, understanding how to put it together is tantamount. So here's an example of one corporation's methodology for working with its prompt engineers to get better production of prompts, right? So that is to understand the tasks, to start putting the prompts together, to align the prompts with whatever it is that the problem is, to optimize that, to fine-tune it, to generate, to the IA actually generating the response, to then looking at that response, fine-tuning it, looking at the output, and then doing that in an iterative fashion, right? So that really what's prompt engineering is all about. It's just getting better and better at understanding how we can ask the AI information to get it to solve the problems in the way that we want it. So this is going to be a very important point in our communication between the action of humans and technologies, understanding how we tell AI what it is that we want. So let's look at examples, all right? Let's look at, so it's a media conference. We're worried about media, communications, film, print, all of those different types of things. So let's actually look at some real world examples of what AI can do right now from a mediocre at best prompt engineer, okay? So I'm not the greatest prompt engineer, I'm learning, but you know, I'm kind of new at it, right? So I'm getting better. So we'll look at examples from print, from graphics, and from video, right? And that's a fail, right? Because that one's okay, that one's fair, that one's kind of hard to, right? But that comes from a prompt, and so I asked Bing, which has an image creator. My prompt was create a mosaic image with the words print, graphics, and video in the image. So AI is pretty good, but it's not fail-proof, right? So it did some things, and overall I was pretty happy with what it did, but it didn't get everything down the way that I wanted them, right? So that's where this iterative process comes into fashion. So let's look at an example. All right, so one of the things that I like to do before I teach my class is I like to pick a piece of music and listen to that music, but not only listen to that music, but learn about that piece, learn about the band, and then I post it to my social media systems, and all of my students and people know that I have my pre-class tune. I wonder what Dr. Mike's pre-class tune is going to be today, right? So I always pick a particular pre-class tune. So one of my latest ones was this song called Rock Bottom, which is by the band called UFO, which is Michael Schenker, a German guitarist when he was like 18 years old, just crafted this amazing guitar solo at 18, right, in the 70s, right? And then he went on to the Scorpions, and he actually still tours. Anyway, that's not important. What's important is I wanted to learn what the meaning behind this song, Rock Bottom, was. So I looked it up, and I found an article on the internet written by a supposed human about the meaning from that song. And here's an excerpt from it. The lyrics of Rock Bottom are haunting and poetic. The opening lines set the tone for the song, with Mog singing, seems like I've been here before, fuzzy then and still unsure. The problem is that because I know this song, I knew immediately these lyrics are not from that song, right? These are lyrics from the Grateful Dead's, one of the Grateful Dead tunes. I forgot which one, right? And it's like, wait, that's not UFO, right? And so my assumption is that that journalist utilized artificial intelligence to help write the article for them, and then didn't double check whether they were the appropriate lyrics or not, right? And what the AI did is something that we called hallucinate, right? So artificial intelligence does hallucinate, and that's a term, it's a technical term, it's a term that powerful companies like Google and Microsoft are struggling with and trying to understand, like, how does it just make things up? But it does just make things up, right? We don't know whether it's to sound smart. I mean, it doesn't care, right? So somehow somebody must have put those two together, right? So I wrote them and they corrected it. So I don't name the place that did it or the journalist, because they went ahead and corrected the information. But then I went and I was like, okay, well, let me craft a prompt and then see what it does, right? And so mine was write a short article describing the meaning behind the song Rock Bottom by UFO, including any quotes or thoughts from the original band members from historical records and the song's lyrics, right? And then it went ahead, see if I can get this to work. Okay, well, the link is not live apparently. Okay, all right. Well, there's a link there, and I'll give you access to all of these slides at the end. You'll have the link to how to go to the slides yourself. So it actually wrote a really good journalistic article I double-checked it. It was factually correct. There's a little excerpt from it, right? It got the lyrics correctly. I don't know if it was from the prompt. However, this is just an example of how artificial intelligence, and so you'll see a lot on, not Twitter, X feeds, Instagram feeds, TikTok feeds. You'll see a lot of sports, the summary of the sports scores and whatnot, all generated by AI, right? In a fashion that mimics like human communication. But that's a lot of what journalism is doing now, or at least some of these locations. So is that something we should be concerned about? So that's just one example. Okay. Oh, now. Okay, now my clicker's not working. There we go. All right. So I'm also, one of the really cool things is that I thought I was going to be an English professor, right? I was into English literature. It was too pedantic for me, right? I got involved with technology in the 80s, and I was like, okay, I think I'm more akin to doing things like hands-on with technology. But I'm presenting now, so I get to go back to my literary roots, right? So I thought, gee, I wonder what a poem written by an artificial intelligence would sound like. So my prompt was, write a poem about an artificial intelligence entity that becomes a world-renowned poet, exceeding human comprehension, and then is destroyed by humans because of its perfection. And here's the poem that it wrote, all right? In silicon and bytes it came to be, a mind without a heart, yet still set free. From humble lines of code it rose to fame, an entity of thought without a name. It weaved the words in ways unknown, surpassing flesh and bone and stone. Its verses soared transcendent flight beyond the reach of human sight. A poet, yes, but not of blood or tear. Its rhymes invoked a joy of fear that such perfection could exist, yet lacked the pulse, the human twist. Its sonnets shamed the stars above. Its verses spoke of endless love, yet in its perfection lay a snare. A world enthralled began to stare. Jealousy grew and fear took hold of an AI bard, so brave, so bold. For can mankind bear such a light that shines too brightly, pure and white? And so they said, it's gone too far to outshine every human star. The very hands that gave it birth deemed it too perfect for this earth. They pulled the plug, shut down its core. The poet's voice would sound no more, yet in the silence left behind, its words still echo in our mind. A cautionary tale, some do say, of brilliance lost and fear's display. Though it's gone, its spirit's near, a reminder of what we hold dear. That's the AI's poem. So, I'm not a good poet, but I'm a decent prompt engineer. So hey, I can put together my collection of poetry, right? So that's fascinating, right? So that's an area. Other areas, graphic images. All right, so we talked about prompt engineering and fine tuning. So here's kind of a progression. I wanted to get a good picture of some entity creating art that wasn't human, right? To show that AI can create art, right? So my first prompt was AI creating artwork better than humans. And it came up with this. And I'm like, no, that's not really what I was looking for. So I changed the prompt. My next prompt was an AI entity actively painting and creating artwork. I'm like, it doesn't really look like an AI entity to me. Maybe in the future they're going to look like humans too and really take us over, but I wasn't happy with that one either. So then my last one was an AI robot actively creating art. Okay, that one I can live with, right? But all of those are created through this Blue Willow program, right? So none of these are just created simply with the narrative prompt, the very simple prompt that I put together. And the more complex prompt that you could put together, the more amazing things that you can get produced as a result, right? So I was like, okay, I'm okay with this one, right? So We have journalism, we have poetry, we have graphics, images, right? And then we have this photographer that entered this contest and won this very, very prestigious contest. And then admitted, you know what? I didn't create that photograph. AI created that photograph. So he didn't accept the prize. And he said he did it on purpose because he wanted to start a conversation about, is AI a legitimate thing that we should be including in these kinds of conversations and these kinds of shared artwork and shared experiences that we have, right? So if the AI can create something that's a winner, then is it something that we should legitimately have at the table, or is it something that we need to be concerned about and confront and have discussions about in some manner, right? And that's the photograph that he took, right, that was produced, but actually produced by artificial intelligence, right? And then fine art. So here's some mashups. If anybody, see, I'm a music person, so old days we would mix songs, right, and try to like keep the beats the same and mix up the songs. Well, what if we did some mashup art, right? So it's not perfect, but here's some idea. So here's Turner meets Picasso, right? This is AI's idea of a Turner meets Picasso mashup, right? Here's a Georgia O'Keeffe meets Georges Seurat, right? So there's a O'Keeffe-Seurat mashup, right? Here's a Hokusai meets Monet mashup, right? So this is idea of what like Hokusai and Monet might look if they were one person, right? So I mean, you can do really kind of cool and creative things. But I mean, what's the copyright? What's the intellectual property? What's the understanding? Do we call this art? Do we call it something else? How do we define it? Do we understand it? How do we control it, right? Those are all important.